So this really did get under my skin. The sheer dishonesty of Bloomberg here. Almost the quintessential textbook example of quote mining for sensationalism. And then that's taken by the Young Turks, who do absolutely no investigation of their own and come out with an interpretation of an EPA document that is almost the diametric opposite of what that document actually says, simply so they can turn it into a criticism of Trump. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's no secret that I hate Trump. I think having an idiot for a president is a bad thing. But really, this is just some of the most comically inept journalism I've ever seen. Okay, so I'm working on finishing up the latest Why Do People Laugh at Creationist videos, and someone sends me this, and it immediately pushes so many buttons. So this is just a quick video. I'm not going to put this in the Patreon supported feed or anything. But
we can get into a lot more detail on that, but I want to tell you about the news story, and this is broken by Bloomberg. And it is about radiation levels. Just when you thought they couldn't get worse, well, they're about to. The new determination sets a level 10 times the drinking water standard for radiation recommended under President Barack Obama. Get a load of this. The level that Pruitt is suggesting is equivalent to as many as 5,000 chest x-rays or 7 to 14 chest CAT scans, according to a comparison with Food and Drug Administration data.
Now this just set my bullshit radar off on every level. I mean, okay, so let's just say for sake of argument that Cenk's got it completely right on the surface here. That it's 10 times what it was under Obama, and now it's the equivalent of 5,000 chest x-rays, which means under Obama, it must have been the equivalent of 500 chest x-rays. Don't actually sound that much better to me. Yeah, so let's take a look at what actually went down here. Okay, so this is the Bloomberg article that sort of triggered it all. EPA says higher radiation levels pose no harmful health effects. Direct quote. And this is from Ari Natter from Climate Change. Why is radiation in climate change? I'm not quite sure anyway. EPA says protective levels is 10 times that set under Obama, and Trump administration guidelines may be a prelude to easier rules. Okay, let's see the powerful argument they've got for that, shall we? In the event of a dirty bomb or nuclear meltdown, emergency responders can safely tolerate radiation levels equivalent to 1,000 chest x-rays, the EPA said in new guidelines that ease off on established safety levels. The EPA's determination sets a level 10 times the drinking water standard for radiation recommended under Barack Obama. It could lead to the administration of President Donald Trump weakening radiation safety levels, a watchdog groups critical of the move say. Right? So who those watchdogs are doesn't say. Basically, someone says this might be what's going to happen. So let's actually take a look at this document, shall we? It's from the EPA, and this is pretty much all the advice that I would give to anyone if they're in a environment with enhanced radioactivity. It's basically general safety rules for what they say is going to be a dirty bomb or a nuclear emergency or something, right? They're just common sense things. So let's take a look and see if we can actually find what they're going to say about water. You know, let's see if we can find where it says that the drinking water standards are going to give me a radiation dose equal to thousands of chest x-rays. Okay, so there's quite a lot about water in here. Let's see what things it's got to say on water. Sometimes officials may take steps to stop people and animals from consuming certain foods if those foods may be contaminated. Well, seems fairly common sense to me. Drinking water. If alternative drinking water is needed, officials can provide bottled water, change the water source, such as switching to groundwater, reroute water from an unaffected water system, or choose a combination of these actions, which is exactly what you would do if there was a contaminated water supply. And how does Bloomberg sum up this perfectly sensible advice in their article? They say, Ruck said he was concerned that the document signaled that in the event of a Fukushima-type nuclear meltdown, the EPA would allow the public consumption of radiation-contaminated water. Dr. Strangelove is alive and lurking somewhere in the corridors of the EPA, he said. Seriously, did any of you read the EPA document you're commenting on?
It's perfectly fine. You'll be fine. Oh, if there's a nuclear meltdown like Fukushima, or there's a dirty bomb and you really want to be safe, we're just going to tell you that you can drink the water that's filled with radiation and we'll pretend it's safe. 5,000 chest x-rays.
Are there controls on drinking water? If alternative drinking water is needed, officials can provide bottled water, change the water. What? This is exactly the same as it said earlier. Reroute water from an unaffected water system or choose a combination of these actions. But whatever. That's exactly what you would do if there was contamination in the water supply. Nowhere here is it saying that you can drink water with 10 times the amount of radiation in it, equal to thousands of chest x-rays. Okay, this is basically what you do if you get radioactive dust on you.
The EPA is supposed to look out for us, the citizens. It's not supposed to look out for the industry.
When washing, try to keep the dust and water from entering your mouth and don't swallow the water. Again, sensible stuff. You know, when you've got radioactive dust on the outside, you just wash it off and you're done. You're free from it. It's still got blank bits that need to be filled in this document. Anyway.
Let's go. Nuclear energy is awesome. All of the above. Fossil fuels are great. Nuclear is great. And if there's a meltdown, you just drink the water filled with radiation. Who cares?
Where is the radioactive material located? Radiation and environmental health experts are checking air, water, and ground. Okay, yeah. So basically, people are going to be checking what the condition of these things is and will advise you accordingly. And a repeat of if you get radioactive dust on you, wash it off, don't swallow the water, sensible stuff.
These are dangerous people, and now we live in dangerous times. God help us if there is actually radiation. They're going to allow it, and they're going to tell you it's safe when it isn't anywhere near safe, and almost all scientists agree that it's not safe.
Is the water safe to use? Bottled water and sealed juice or soda containers will be free from radioactive contamination. Quite right. Wipe or rinse the outside of the bottles or cans before opening them. Again, perfectly common sense advice. There is nothing here about radiation standards, which is kind of obvious. This is basically the idiot's guide of what to do if there's radioactive contamination around. Boiling tap water does not get rid of radioactive material. Well, duh. Okay. Right, so, I mean, it's fairly obvious that this isn't going into any of the technical details, such as radiation doses in water, which makes me wonder how people like the Young Turks got to this.
The new determination sets a level 10 times the drinking water standard for radiation recommended under President Barack Obama. Get a load of this. The level that Pruitt is suggesting is equivalent to as many as 5,000 chest x-rays or 7 to 14 chest CAT scans, according to a comparison with Food and Drug Administration data.
So let's just take this document, which is some very common sense advice of what to do in the event of a radiological incident, and see if there is anything in here at all about radiation doses. So I'm just going to search some units. Sieverts, let's go for Sieverts. And we come across this, right? These are two measures of radiation exposure, millirem and millisieverts. I'm going to go for millirem just because it'll make life easier. They're just a yardstick. I'll explain what they are shortly. According to radiation safety experts, radiation exposure of between 5,000 and 10,000 millirem usually result in no harmful health effects because radiation below these levels is a minor contributor to our overall cancer risk, right? You got that? Usually result in no harmful health effects, which is then taken by Bloomberg in one of the most shitty pieces of journalism ever. Usually result in no harmful health effects becomes pose no harmful health effects. If you wanted the quintessential example of quote mining, this is it. And of course, then that's just taken by the Young Turks as gospel.
We can get into a lot more detail on that, but I want to tell you about the news story, and this is broken by Bloomberg. And it is about radiation levels. Just when you thought they couldn't get worse. 10 times the drinking water standard for radiation.
Oh, good for them for not checking what the hell the actual report says. I mean, it's not that hard to read it yourself, right? Because radiation below these levels is a minor contributor to overall cancer risk. Entirely true. Safety recommendations are designed to keep your dose as low as possible.
Now, radiation is not safe at any level. That is the consensus of scientists. But Scott Pruitt doesn't believe in science. He doesn't believe it. A 2007 version of the same document stated that no level of radiation is safe. No level, okay? That was under Bush, another deeply right-wing Republican.
Safety recommendations are designed to keep your dose as low as possible. This is advice I would follow myself when I deal with radioactive materials, which I do on a regular basis, right? These are not foreign waters to me. I've got Geiger counters and gamma ray spectrometers in my apartment. I've got samples of uranium, thorium, and cesium-137 in my apartment, right? It usually takes a larger radiation dose of more than 75,000 millirem in a short amount of time, usually minutes to hours, to cause immediate health effects such as acute radiation sickness. Again, entirely true. So radiation can kill your cells, and if you get enough of your cells killed all in one go, it can overwhelm your metabolism and either cause sickness or death. That's what acute radiation sickness is. But you need very large doses to do this. Yeah, far larger than you would usually ever come into contact with, right? So your usual problem is just general radiation exposure, which can pose a cancer risk. So let's just check out this actual statement. Usually result in no harmful health effects. And for that, we're going to come to the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And their numbers are about right. That the average background dose is, we're just going to take this as a yardstick. It says it's 300 millirem per year, but I'm going to round it up to 500 just to make the numbers easier to deal with, right? Whereas a nuclear worker can get a dose of 5,000 per year. That's the industry limit on the radiation dose for a radiation worker. Is 10 times background, which you might think's a lot, but we'll come back to that shortly, right? So if we take background as this would be 10 times background. Turns out that your radiation exposure on an airplane is about 30 times background. In fact, I've actually taken a radiation dosimeter on a plane where the background's about, 0.1 microsieverts per hour. And you get onto a plane and it can go up to 4 microsieverts per hour. That's 40 times background. Especially seeing as, from this sort of distance, that's a sort of typical background, but you actually sort of put this thing up close. And it gets pretty toasty pretty quick. And I think the official US rules for shipping radioactive stuff, right, so background's about 0.1, 0.2, that sort of thing. I think the US shipping rules are it's got to be less than 0.5 on the surface. It's all kind of bloody stupid anyway, because when I was on the airplane, this went up to 4.
This is why you should never turn these things on during a flight. They are absolutely crazy. It's the highest I've ever seen it on a plane. Crazy.
That's 4 times higher a rate exposure than the annual dose for a radiation worker. And that is actually peanuts in itself, because you go into space and it goes up to about 100 times background. So 500 is going to be background, 5,000 is going to be 10 times background, 50,000 is going to be in space. So here we've got radiation doses for space. However, international standards allow for as much as 5,000 millirem a year for those who work around radioactive materials. For spaceflight, the limit is higher. The NASA limit for radiation exposure in low Earth orbit is 50,000 millirem per year, right? So that's 10 times higher than a radiation worker exposure per year, or 100 times what you get just in terrestrial radiation. And is there any great propensity for our astronauts to have cancer? No. Is there any great propensity for nuclear radiation workers to have cancer? No. Hell, while touring around America, I found somewhere by the roadside that had over 150 times the natural background radiation. And the thing you'll notice is even at that, the plants are growing happily.
Right, so this is actually already fairly toasty. Normal background sort of 0.1, 0.2-ish maybe. So this is already quite high. This is already enough to get a gamma ray spectrum till you walk just behind the sign, okay? And you'll notice it's getting a little toastier. A little toastier. In fact, there's uranium absolutely everywhere around here. So you sort of stick it under a plant somewhere and immediately goes with a high radiation alarm. That's 50 times background, 100 times background, 120 times background-ish. So it's 100 times background just by the roadside in America.
Now, given a choice, would I choose to live in such a high radiation area? Hell no. Like the EPA document says, you should try to keep your radiation dose to a minimum. But also, like the EPA document says, that you can actually go into these really quite high radiation areas with relatively little effect. What you would describe as usually result in no harmful health effects. And just to put all this into context, I went to do the calculations for putting background radiation in terms of a risk that you would normally deal with every day. Say, for instance, your chances of dying in a car crash. It turns out that about a year's worth of background radiation gives me about the same chance of dying from cancer as driving about 1,000 miles. And seeing as your average American drives some 10,000 miles per year, that means that you're about 10 times more likely to die in a car accident on the roads than you are to die from cancer from the background radiation. Or another way of looking at it, you could live your whole life in an area with 10 times the normal background radiation, and even at that, you would only have comparable chances of dying from cancer from the background radiation as you do from driving your car. What the EPA document says here is entirely common sense, and obviously unfinished, put in context of radiation incident doses, like I've just done for you. Yeah, and for Bloomberg to take this, usually result in no harmful effects, and spray up the title, EPA says higher radiation levels pose no harmful health effects, is just complete and utter bullshit.